seconds to go. Puts it up and scores at the buzzer. All the man is out on the field. It's another knockdown. You know, Jim. You believe in miracles? Yes.
The All Things Sport Podcast with your hosts, Damian Banks and Pierre Banks on Spreaker Radio.
What's happening? What's up? What's going on? It's the All Things Sport Podcast, and I'm Damian Banks. Ladies and gentlemen, the listening public, I'm back, and I'm better. It's me, Damian Banks. You're listening to the All Things Sport Podcast right here on Spreaker Radio. For our casual listeners, welcome. For my longtime listeners, thank you so much. The love is so much appreciated, and I reciprocate that love right back at you. Again, this is Damian Banks. I'm your host of the All Things Sport Podcast. You can reach me on Instagram and Twitter at Sports by Damian. SportsDaimeon. I know. Damian is spelled kind of weird. Blame Dolores Gamble Banks. That's my mom. Rest in peace, Mom. Yeah, man, she named me Damian, and the spelling is a bit off, but bear with me again. Twitter, Instagram, SPORTS. That's sports by BYDAIMEON. Ladies and gentlemen, it's so good to be back. And this time of year, it's really fantastic if you are a sports guy, sports media, podcasting writer, because so many of the sports are happening at one time. We're midway through the season, in the NFL. Basketball season, the NBA has just started. College football is in the thralls of their season. College basketball is about to start. Major League Baseball just ended. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the Chicago Cubs, yeah, you heard it right. The Chicago Cubs are the 2016 World Series champions. Slow clap, ladies and gentlemen, slow clap. Now that you're done clapping, let me just be the first to congratulate all the Cub fans, all the long-suffering, Chicago Cub fans. The Cubs hadn't won a World Series in 108 years. Imagine that. 108 years without a championship. And a lot of Cubs fans have lived, they've died without seeing their team win a championship. Now, I'm a Baltimore Orioles fan. I haven't seen my team win a championship, but we've won a championship in the past 50 to 75 years. I'm a San Francisco 49er fan. I've seen my team win 5 Super Bowls. So I don't know how it feels to root for a team and never see them win. So from me to you, Chicago Cub fans, congratulations. You overcame a 3-1 deficit in the World Series. The Cleveland Indians had a 3-1 lead. Now that's irony for you, ladies and gentlemen. The Cleveland Cavaliers overcame a 3-1 deficit versus the Golden State Warriors to win an NBA championship. The Cleveland Indians blew a 3-1 lead versus the Chicago Cubs. You can't write these things, man. This is what sports is all about, man. So, again, I would be remiss if I didn't congratulate all the Chicago Cub fans. And it was just a fantastic World Series, a fantastic season for the Cubs. I'm calling it right now. Theo Epstein, general manager for the Chicago Cubs, he is going into the Baseball Hall of Fame. He lifted the curse for the Boston Red Sox, and he has now lifted the curse for the Chicago Cubs. Slow clap, ladies and gentlemen, for Theo Epstein. Sex or chocolate. That boy can sing. But I digress. I'm Damian Banks, as I said before. You are listening to the All Things Sport Podcast. And what I try to do on the All Things Sport Podcast is entertain you, educate you, make you think. I don't want to make you think too much because, it's a sports show. I try to keep it sports. I try not to bring politics into it. I try not to bring, too many things that are Debbie Downers into my podcast. But with that being said, I have to move on to the NFL. I'm going to focus again on this podcast on the Carolina Panthers. My listeners are located primarily in the Carolinas, North Carolina and South Carolina. I am located in the beautiful Banks Boy Studios right here in Durham, North Carolina. So it's only right that I cover the Carolina Panthers. Now, on the last podcast, I delved into why the Carolina Panthers were having a sucky season so far. You know, at the time of that podcast, they had only won one game. A team that won 15 games last season had only won one game so far this season. And I wanted to talk a little bit about why I thought the Carolina Panthers were having a subpar season. And I think if you listened to the last podcast, you would have heard me really go into detail about how I think that the Panthers weren't controlling the line of scrimmage. The offensive line of scrimmage and the defensive line of scrimmage. I am a former football player, played my whole life all the way up until college at the Virginia State University. CIAA champions while I was there, but I digress. And if you played football or if you know anything, you have a slight, understanding of the game of football, then you would know that if you control the line of scrimmage, you can control the game. If you control the offensive line of scrimmage, you can run the ball, you can protect the quarterback, you can do play action off those successful run plays. If you control the line of scrimmage on the defensive side of the ball, you can pressure the opposing team's quarterback, you can get sacks, you can cause havoc in the backfield, not allow that opposing team to run the ball, therefore rendering them one-dimensional, make them a passing team, and you could just tee off with your defensive ends and just rush the passer. So controlling the line of scrimmage is very important in the game of football. So I spoke about why the Carolina Panthers were struggling so far this season is because, in my humble, they were not controlling the line of scrimmage. So the Panthers had a bye week after my last podcast, and they played. After the bye week, they had a rematch of the NFC Championship game of last season with the Arizona Cardinals. They welcomed the Cardinals to Bank of America Stadium. Now, head coach Ron Rivera is not on the hot seat. He has, a certain cachet of good wealth in Charlotte with owner Jerry Richardson. So Ron Rivera is not on the hot seat. But offensive coordinator Mike Shula, defensive coordinator Sean McDermott, I don't know if I could have said the same thing about you two guys. So coming off the bye week, the Panthers should have been prepared to play the Arizona Cardinals. The Cardinals were coming off a very tough game versus the Seattle Seahawks, so they had a short week in preparing for the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers had extra time to prepare for the Cardinals. And let's face it, last season in the NFC Championship game, the Panthers destroyed the Arizona Cardinals. They did the Arizona Cardinals much like Craig did Debo at the end of Friday. They got knocked up, man. But I digress. So the Panthers came into the game off the bye week with the Arizona Cardinals. They wanted to kind of get their groove back. They wanted to build momentum for the rest of the season. And I think they did that, ladies and gentlemen. A decisive victory, albeit it only ended up being a 10-point victory for the Panthers. They hopped out to a 24-0 lead, ultimately winning the game, I think 30-20. The Arizona Cardinals came back to make the game somewhat respectable. But the Carolina Panthers, they controlled the line of scrimmage, starting with, on the defensive side of the ball, their defensive linemen, Starla Tulele, Coney Ely, K'Wan Short, Charles Johnson, they created a lot of pressure, and they put that pressure on Carson Palmer, resulting actually in a fumble of Carson Palmer, and the first points, a fumble return for a touchdown by Thomas Davis. Thomas Davis, one of the stellar linebackers for the Carolina Panthers. So the defensive linemen for the Carolina Panthers did their job. They created pressure on the opposing team's quarterback, controlled that line of scrimmage. David Johnson had come into that game, the running back for the Arizona Cardinals. He had been on fire. Over 1,000 yards rushing coming into that game with the Carolina Panthers. But the Panthers' defensive lineman was having none of it. They controlled that line of scrimmage, made the Arizona Cardinals a one-dimensional team. David Johnson could not run the ball, made Carson Palmer drop back and try to beat them through the air. And without a run game, the defensive linemen for the Carolina Panthers were able to tee off on Carson Palmer to the tune of 8 sacks for the game. So they being the Carolina Panthers defensive line and the defense as a whole were able to create pressure on the quarterback without blitzing. And now that's so important because the secondary for the Carolina Panthers is not the best. They don't have Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders is not walking through that room. Aeneas Williams is not walking through that door. So the Carolina Panthers defensive secondary, they're very limited this year, especially with Josh Norman signing with the Washington Redskins in the offseason. So when the Carolina Panthers are able to apply pressure to the opposing team's quarterback without blitzing, if they can just get pressure with their front four, that bodes well for their weak secondary. So there's going to be a fall off in the secondary when you lose a caliber player of Josh Norman. So that pressure from the defensive lineman is critical for the Carolina Panthers. Now, the Panthers have one of the best linebacker corps in the National Football League. Luke Kuechly, Thomas Davis, and an emerging Shaq Thompson are an excellent trio of linebackers. So if they don't have to blitz those backers, everything works out just fine for the Carolina Panthers defense, man. And they showed and proved during that Arizona Cardinals game. Kind of got that groove back, much like Tay Diggs did for Stella, and Stella got a groove back. For anyone who is a movie buff such as myself, man, I not to veer off subject a little bit, but I love watching movies, man. I love movie theater popcorn with a lot of butter on it. As much cholesterol as humanly possible without me having a stroke or a heart attack right there in the movie theater. Love movies. And the movie that the Carolina Panthers starred in versus the Arizona Cardinals was one of a dominant team. They're trying to get that dominance back that they had during last season. Got off to a really slow start. And they're trying to make up ground. Now, the NFC South, the Atlanta Falcons are playing really well, but the New Orleans Saints and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they are pretty similar teams record-wise to the Carolina Panthers. So after that win over the Arizona Cardinals, the Panthers are they're feeling good about themselves. The next stretch of games, they should and could win these games. They are at the LA Rams next this upcoming weekend. Then they host the Kansas City Chiefs, a depleted Kansas City Chiefs team at that. And then they host the New Orleans Saints, a divisional rival game. So the Carolina Panthers, they still have time to salvage their season. They still have time to accomplish the goals that they set for themselves before the season started, before they got off to that slow start. But all you Carolina Panthers fans, don't fret. The Panthers won that game against Arizona, so you got half off of a dozen Krispy Kremes. Let's see if the Carolina Panthers can keep that momentum up. I'm not sure, man. We talked about controlling the line of scrimmage, and they did that against the Arizona Cardinals. Now, can the Carolina Panthers control the offensive line of scrimmage like they did the defensive line of scrimmage? That's the key question. I'm going to talk about that after this commercial break. You're listening to the All Things Sport podcast. You're listening to me, Damian Banks, right here on Spreaker Radio. It's ATS, baby.
What up, this is Pierre Banks, and when I'm back in Boone watching the Mountaineers, my first stop is always Mountaineer Mania. The good folks at Mountaineer Mania have the widest selection of app gear, so you can cheer on the Mountaineers in style. T-shirts, hats, hoodies, sweatshirts, decals, cornhole sets. I mean, if you need it, they've got it. So head on down to Mountaineer Mania at 497 West King Street in Boone and tell them I sent you.
Welcome back to the All Things Sport podcast. I'm your host, Damian Banks. This portion of the podcast is brought to you by Triangle Entertainment Worldwide. TEWorldwide.com. TEWorldwide.com, you can find video and photo shoot production, talent management consultation, label shopping, performance booking, CD duplication and artwork, Reverb Nation services, logo designs, press kit creations, bio write-ups, legal services, radio placement,